Well, good evening, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Bill Loudon. I'm Senior Deputy Vice-Chancellor at the University of Western Australia. Welcome to a packed university lecture theatre to hear a lecture about the end of lectures. Let me begin by acknowledging the Indigenous people who own the land on which we meet. It's a tradition of the university to acknowledge that this university is situated on Noongar land and that Noongar people remain the spiritual and cultural custodians of their land and continue to practice their values, languages, belief and knowledge. Welcome indeed to this lecture in the series Inquiring Minds, a series brought to you by the Institute of Advanced Studies, by Research Services here at UWA and by the Centre of Software Practice. Now, we're going to hear in a moment from David Glance, and I'll introduce him in a moment. But I want you to know he's going to talk quite a lot about educational theory. He's a software designer. I just want to get in early. I'll later be talking quite a lot about software design. I'm a professor of education. So let's go to David. David's talking about the topic of the moment. I sat at dinner last night with a whole pile of nuclear scientists, and all they wanted to talk about was massive open online courses. When I wanted to talk about little microscopic things they could measure. But no, they wanted to talk about the end of the lecture. So here we are. Let me introduce David Glance. David runs our Centre for Software Practice here at the University of Western Australia, has a long history before he came to the university in the software industry, including working with some of the largest software companies in the world. His work here at the university includes the development of an amazing e-health system, which is revolutionising the delivery of timely e-health information right across the top of the country. So it's my pleasure to introduce David Glance.
Thank you very much. And yes, I'm going to make some apologies right up front. First of all, when I do venture into the topic of talking about educational theory, and I have to express that these opinions are mine or borrowed. And also when I'm talking about the university in terms of some of the projects specifically about online courses that we're embarking on as well. So the topic, as Bill mentioned, there is a huge amount of interest in open online courses. The conversation ran a series just recently. I'm not sure if you're familiar with the Conversational website where academics write and express all sorts of opinions. In fact, I think this is where I honed my skills for talking about things that I wasn't an expert in. And but they ran a session down in Canberra with the government's Department of Education, talking about the future of higher education, and the entire debate was on massive open online courses. So some irony there in the fact that there were Deputy Vice-Chancellors and Vice-Chancellors of universities saying that this was not a game changer. This was not going to necessarily threaten their business or their revolution, but the only thing that they could talk about the future of higher education was this subject. Interestingly, as I'll point out, these are the same sort of things that newspaper industry said at the advent of new media. Okay, so I'm going to cover a number of different subjects. First of all, how we actually pronounce the word MOOC or MOOC, and I'm not sure if there's a linguist in the room, but we haven't quite worked out whether it should be MOOC or MOOC. There's also the idea that if this is a massive open online course, if you have a small open online course, is it a SOC? And would you have a SMOOC? And then you can have free open online courses as well. So I'm going to talk about what they are. I'm going to give some examples because I'm not sure how many, just as a show of hands, how many people have actually gone and looked at an online course. So quite a few. All right, so you're probably going to know everything I'm going to talk about. Talk about some of the defining attributes of these things. What is it that actually makes this different to what we've done in the past and what we do every day at, on campus here at UWA and other universities? talk about the disruption and accreditation issues around these online courses, and then about UWA's small project in this area, which is tentatively code-named UWA ClasstoGo, and I'll explain why that is as I go through. Okay, so first dealing about what these things are and something about the history. But first of all, just try and imagine that you can, that you could, if you wanted to, take a university course from Princeton for free. And that instead of taking this course at the university you're enrolled in at UWA, you could take a different course given by the University of Melbourne or Curtin. And also, furthermore, that instead of doing the entire course from the University of Melbourne, you could take components from UWA, components from Melbourne, and components from the University of Michigan and make up the same course. And interestingly, one of the courses that I was enrolled with on the site Coursera, we'll talk about later, was given by the University of Michigan. It was about social network analysis. I didn't particularly like the approach that the lecturer was taking. She was very capable, but there was a similar course being run by the University of Pennsylvania on Coursera about the same topic, and I switched to that topic, and it was a much better suited to my way of thinking, and I learned a lot more. And interestingly, then I could go back to the original one and understand it a little bit better or appreciate it a little bit more. So that really sort of outlines some of the possibilities of these open online courses. So what are they? Well, the open and online is that they are web-based, so you can actually access them from a web browser, mobile phone, iPad. They're open, so that means that not necessarily that the content is open, and this is sort of an important distinction about this. You can't go in, copy the content, and host your own course using that content. That's something that may develop in terms of other courses, but it's still copyright. But it's open in terms of anybody can access it, there aren't any prerequisites, and it's free. The massive part of it is an interesting aspect because this really came about almost by accident with the first course, as we'll see. There was huge numbers, and we're talking about 160,000 people enrolled in a course. So what does it mean? Well, if the University of Melbourne have put 6 courses up on Coursera, they've got, at the moment, 38,000 people interested in that. So what is massive? It's more than you would have enrolled in your course on university. They usually run over a shortened time period. Some are actually the material and the content that is given in the on-campus version of the course. But most of the courses that I've looked at have been abbreviated, so they run over a shorter period. But they can feature the same material that is given offline, as some people call it, or it can be specially done, so it depends on your point of view. Some universities, the University of Edinburgh, for example, have said that they will deliberately not provide the same content they're providing their own students because they're concerned about cannibalizing their own courses. I think that's probably not the case, but possible. Okay, so the term itself comes from about 2008, but it really was popularized in 2011. And I want to talk about also a guy called Salman Khan, because even though what he did was not targeted at universities, and from the 2 minutes I managed to talk to Bill, I am going to make a distinction in educational theory between children and the adults that we teach. But he really set the scene for the type of approach that people then later borrowed in terms of how he actually did the Khan Academy, and I'll talk to you and show you a bit about that. So he started with videos that he posted online. He was tutoring his niece in maths, and he had to have a way of actually doing this when he was living in a different city to her. And so the Khan Academy came about and the way that he presented this material and the educational theory that underlies it. Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig, it has to be said that Stanford has really been behind an awful lot of what's been come out in this area. But these two decided, for whatever reason, to put their artificial intelligence course that they taught at Stanford online, and that's where they were quite surprised to find 160,000 people enroll for it. That's not to say that they all finished, and again, that's sort of an issue that we can discuss, but slightly more people than actually they taught online. In fact, in one discussion by Daphne Kohler and about Andrew Ng, who started Coursera, which was another site, Andrew's course that he teaches at Stanford, again, he does online, and to get the same numbers that he got on Coursera in 1 year, he would have to teach for 250 years. And the theory is that he would get actually a little bit bored by that. So Sebastian Thrun left Stanford and formed another site called Udacity. And then two more Stanford academics, Daphne Kohler and Andrew Ng, started Coursera. And then Harvard, MIT, Berkeley launched another site called edX. So why did they do this? Well, a very good question. It wasn't because they were asked to do it, and it was largely an academic-led initiative. And it has to be said that a lot of this at the moment, up until Harvard and really MIT decided to invest some of their own money into it, it was academics who decided that they wanted to do this and just went and started posting things online. There is a reputational element, so a lot of the interest in why especially US universities are flocking to actually getting their courses online is because you can do more with these courses, with the volume of people that are actually taking it, than you could do with any sort of advertising on a global scale. You know, there are people in villages in Africa, in Tibet, in Nepal that are doing these courses. In fact, and somebody will correct me, but the top scoring person was in the artificial intelligence course, above all of the students at Stanford, was a 15-year-old in a village in Tibet. So that is one of the things, the massive opportunities that we get out of this. So philanthropic, absolutely. This is part of what universities are all about. It's just that we're not doing it in our neighborhood, we're doing it on a world scale, and we're giving people opportunities. And there's stories every day of people who sign up to these courses and tell their stories about why they're doing it, what opportunities it afforded them. There really aren't very many opportunities to get an education from the leading universities in the world in this way. Also, possibly as important, and will become more important once the fever dies down, is the actual internal use. So how can we use this in a way of actually teaching our own students when we're faced with larger class sizes, with ways of adapting to a student population that's getting used to learning in different ways, wants that flexibility, and we're always constantly looking at ways of improving how we do our business. Okay, so what is it that makes up a MOOC? Well, I'm going to talk about the Khan Academy and specifically about the videos, the massive participation and what that gives us, something about what being open is about, and then something about assessment. Assessment's a thorny subject because it does rely on things like fairly controversial things like peer assessment, self-assessment, automated assessment of tests. But the technology is advancing at a huge rate, but also our understanding and willingness to accept things like peer and self-assessment is another area. So one of the things about this is that the discussion around open online courses has focused about, well, this is no different to what we have been doing for decades. Right? So people especially people like Gavin Moody, for example, who's one of the universities and active commenter on the conversation, will say this is no different to what the Open University did in the UK, or distance learning, or in fact UWA that teaches distance learning on a reasonably large scale. I would actually beg to differ, and I think that it is different, and it's different for a number of reasons. First of all, there's something about the platform itself that it's hosted on, and this is to do with how we've adapted to certain online platforms, and this is something in terms of my expertise, which is the software side, but they are geared to delivering these courses in a very simple, clean way to a massive audience. And that in itself is challenging, but the way that they've actually done that, I think, facilitates that type of approach. Also, the content is different. We've moved away from the 45-minute or the hour-and-a-half lecture block to these short concept videos, or sometimes called Khan-style videos. And these are usually around 10 minutes. So when Salman Khan started his site, he sort of looked at the evidence about what the length of concentration of kids was, and sort of said 10 minutes was really the maximum. None of the videos that he hosts on his site are longer than 10 minutes. And the ability to break those down into concepts means that you can assemble them in a whole range of different ways, and you can allow people to actually take a path themselves as to what makes sense. And that's a very, very important, I think, development in terms of how we deliver this content. There's also some evidence I'll come to. Quizzes, the fact that they have developed automated assessment, given that most of the people involved in this from Stanford were experts in artificial intelligence, in sort of development of software, actually the automated part of this is actually now quite sophisticated, to the point where they can start accepting free text, mathematical equations, code, all in real time, all giving feedback back to the students as they're doing it, these tests. They have the videos which play for a short while, produce a quiz, you can answer the quiz, and then you get all of this feedback as you go on. The tutorials are an interesting approach when you have to deal at scale. There's a heavy use of video conferencing technology using Google, Hangouts, Skype, a whole variety of different ways. I think that they've been experimenting. The sociology course that I did from Princeton used an approach where they picked randomly people from around the world to participate in the tutorial. Everybody could watch it live, could participate in asking questions, or they could just watch it afterwards. But they had a couple of Princeton students at the same time. One of the interesting things about that was just the fact that the person who gave it, Mitch Denier, from Princeton, who's taught this course for some time, realized at the end of it how US-focused the course was, and it took him teaching to the world to actually appreciate and realize that. The peer assistance in terms of the forum, now again, we have Chris McDonald in the room, who's from computer science, who's developed forum software. We've been using it in computer science for some years. Moodle, the online learning management system, has these capabilities as well. But what they didn't actually realize at scale was that when Sebastian Thrun and Peter Norvig first put on their course, they told all of the TAs, the teaching assistants that were working on the course, that they had to be monitoring the forum and watching for any problems, any questions. And what they found was that as soon as somebody posed a question, before they had even had a chance to go in and answer it, somebody else in the world had actually gone in and answered it for them. To the point where the first time they ran it, they identified a cohort of people who had been very active in terms of assisting, answering questions, and they could then re-employ or ask to participate in further courses to help. And amazingly enough, people will do this for free because of the reputational awards that they get. I think also why this is different is that we have a population of students who are now adapted to this form of interaction. And I think that cannot be emphasized enough. When I used to watch Open University on Saturday mornings when I was a child, the cartoons weren't very good in England, and watching organizational management of people up north doing things seemed to be interesting at the time. That was the only thing available to me, and watching TV passively at the time seemed like a great thing to do. Now, of course, with kids coming in who have got used to that whole idea of being on Facebook, interacting in this way, this is a way that they're comfortable with actually assimilating material. They're already used to using Khan Academy and videos as a primary way of learning. So we've changed, or they have changed. Okay, I just want to go into more detail now about things like the concept videos and the Khan-style academies. And as I said, they're short videos, they're 10-minute, less than 10 minutes, and around concept. The idea here, though, is that because of this, and in combination with the quizzes that go along with these videos, you can achieve mastery of a concept. And so there's this idea of mastery-based learning, which has actually got quite a long pedigree in terms of the educational theory, and has fallen in and out of favor. I know this because I've read the book by Salman Khan, which came out last week. Highly recommend it. It's actually a very good book about why he did what he did and what he's getting out of it. As I said, students can pick their own path. So if they're dealing with a particular concept and they're struggling with it, and there's a, sort of something that underlines or underpins that concept, they can go back and understand it. Interestingly, when I was looking at a course from, I think it was Berkeley, and they did a little pre-test to test your knowledge of probability. I failed miserably. I went on to the Khan Academy, brushed up on my probability, and then went back and looked at the video, and it started making sense. So it's that concept that you don't move on to an idea until you've mastered the first one. And this is actually quite an important concept. In teaching normally and at the university, we have a set time, you learn a bunch of things. As long as you pass, then that's the last time you'll probably deal with a lot of those concepts. You don't really have the opportunity then to go back and revisit them. You've got to make the connections then with all of the different paths that you make. So this is actually quite a different thing. It also can emphasize, and I suppose this is important as well, the tutor-style approach. And this, when we sort of look again at the theory about how we learn effectively, tutoring one-on-one is incredibly effective. And the benefit of these Khan-style videos is that it is a very personal way of actually teaching. Peter Norvig again sort of comments on the fact that when he gave his talk, he gave it in the style of Salman Khan, and afterwards he got comments about it saying it was just like having somebody in my living room explaining these concepts to me. Okay, I just wanted to show a video. This is of the Khan Academy, and hopefully the technology will work.
Welcome to the Khan Academy. We are honored that you would join us, and what I hope to do is just give you a walkthrough to think about how you might want to use the site. So first of all, you might know exactly what you want to learn about. You might say, wait, I kind of wonder what a derivative is. So you can do a search right over there, and there's all sorts of exercises and videos that deal with derivatives. For example, you could go to the derivative intuition exercise, and you would see this thing right over here, which makes you think about, well, what's the slope of the tangent line at any of these points? And when you do it, you're essentially plotting the derivative. Or you might say, well, no, I actually want an explanation of what a derivative is. Maybe you've already done the derivative intuition module, and so then you might want to look at a calculus proof or look at some type of what a partial derivative might be, and you click there, and you would actually go to the video. So that's if you kind of know what you're looking for, you can go look at that video. And if you have any questions about things, you have a community here that is there to actually help answer your questions. Now, if you want to kind of go through things in a more structured way, there are other paths that you could go down. You could just say, I want to practice my skills. I want to try some problems out to see what I know and what maybe I don't know. And when you click on Practice Your Skills, you will go to the Khan Academy Knowledge Map. And you'll see this kind of very fascinating graph right over here. And as you the top of the graph, these are more basic concepts. And as you go further and further down the graph, you're getting to more and more advanced topics. And you can zoom out to see kind of the bigger picture of what you're talking about. So at the top, it was more arithmetic. And as you go down, you start getting into pre-algebra and algebra and geometry and trigonometry and eventually some calculus. And there's two ways that you could experience this. Once again, you could just jump into the things that you want to practice right then and there. Or you could say, you know what, I know my arithmetic, but I'm still a little bit foggy on my percentages or my fractions.
To produce the Khan Academy, and I think they've served 2 million different people who have accessed the site. There are schools that use it as the basis of their programs. There's a lot of, I encourage you to sort of have a look at it. If you've got kids, they probably will be using it. My daughter, who's at Perth Modern, does. One of the important things about the video, other than setting this sort of frame of the 10-minute video, the personal approach, say he sits there and he just draws as he goes along. So he doesn't use PowerPoint. It is all, as if he was sitting in the room talking to you. One of the things you can do with these is that you can take a whole range of different approaches in producing these videos. So you can do things online and in video that you can't do standing in front of a room full of students. And another person who teaches at the Khan Academy is a woman called Vi Hart. Again, I encourage you to have a look at her videos. They're incredibly entertaining, and you can learn some maths as well.
Okay, so fractal fractions. 5 equals 5. Bear with me now. Let's explode this 5 into fifths, 25 fifths to be precise. Now I want to split it into 2 parts, say 17 fifths plus 8 fifths. Could have been 1 plus 24 or whatever, I don't care. Okay, now I'm ready for the fun part. Since this 5 down here is just as much a 5 as any 5 is 5, such as this whole thing, which is equivalent to 5, let's go ahead and replace that 5 with this messier looking but still very 5-ly 5. This one too. Oh, and now we've got more 5s, so we can do it again, and again, and again, and then you can give someone this whole thing and be like, whoa, it's 5! Making things look more confusing than they actually are is a delicate art, but it speaks to the true heart of algebra, which is that you can shuffle numbers around all day, and as long as you follow the rules, it all works out. Okay, here's another one.
Okay, as entertaining as it is, she is brilliant. So that technique actually of speeding up the film and having this commentary, and yes, her voice isn't speeded up, is actually another trick that people use, and you see that Peter Norvig, again, uses it in his videos. So the idea that you can actually write things out, but instead of being in 45-minute lecture theatre where you're watching the person laboriously draw these graphs and axes and sort of explaining things and writing formulae, then you can speed it up and get some interesting effects in that way. She just does it in an incredibly entertaining way as well. And if you watch how she makes these videos, it does take a while. So, okay, I just wanted to talk about some of the theory here. So this is from Bloom back in 1984. I did try and do some sort of literature review of whether, sort of this was still held the view. So Daphne Collard gives a nice talk on TED, the TED Talks. She mentions this, and it sort of refers to what's called the 2 sigma problem. And so this is really about the fact that if you take a group of students and you give them just lectures, that's the little hump here, or the distribution. So basically, if you test them using a test at the end of the period, then they will do that well. If you give them lectures and what's called mastery learning, so you provide them with feedback, you give them ways of correcting their understanding and then retest them, they do 1 standard deviation better than the normal population they're getting lectures. And if you do tutorials, so one-on-one, you get 2 standard deviations. So you get a huge improvement in terms of people's understanding, ability to do tests, or at the end, if you get to a tutorial. Again, this is the approach that has been taken in these online courses to try and get the effective way of teaching to be more like a tutorial, or at least employ some of the business or the principles of mastery learning. So the quizzes and tests, the constant quizzes emphasize retrieval practice learning, so there's some theory around that as well, that even just forcing people to try and remember things enhances their learning. So there is some evidence that that works, and that's the basis of what's called these formative tests that are done while you're watching videos, after you're watching videos, and if you don't answer, you can keep answering them. You can go back and watch another video, and you can go back through. The quizzes and videos, as I said, allow for mastery learning. And where we get the massive contribution here, and unfortunately I don't have the diagram that shows this, but one of the interesting criticisms against online courses, other than that they're not based on educational theory, which is slightly ironic because they're claiming they are, is that they don't deal with things like misconceptions. So there's this view that if you give people a video, and there's a PhD student who did this PhD in Melbourne on this, he did it in physics, so it's common misconceptions that university students have about the laws of physics. So you show them a video, you give them a test, and they all get 11 out of 24. Sorry, no, give them the test, this is like telling a joke and getting it wrong, you get the punchline first. Okay, so you test them first, they get 11 out of 24, you show them a video, you ask them, did they understand the video, was the video clear, and did it explain the concepts well? They say yes, absolutely. You retest them, they still get 11 out of 24. And then if you look at what it is, where they're getting wrong, the things wrong is in their misconceptions and their common misconceptions. So if you deal with that in the video and start off by saying, people believe that when you throw an apple in the air, the forces act in this way, but that's wrong, this is the way it should work, you get an improvement. So there's this idea that if you deal with misconceptions in that way, you get an improvement in understanding and learning. Well, the interesting thing when you've got 60,000 people taking a quiz is that it is incredibly easy then to spot where the misconceptions are. If you've got 100 people and 2 people answer a question the same, wrongly, then it could be anything. But when you've got 2,000 people all answering that question as a hotspot, then you know that there's an issue. You can go in and you can adjust it, and you can then monitor it. That massive amount of data is allowing for pretty much real-time modification and alteration of the way that they're teaching these courses. They're adapting all the time. The tests can be scaled to provide automated assessment or can use self or peer assessment. Now, anecdotally, when I did sociology, we had a midterm, and that was free text. So you typed in your answers, and then you had to basically mark your own work, and you had to mark 5 other people's work. And then you got given, at the end of the process, your mark that you felt and the mark that an average of the 5 other people. And it was actually uncanny in terms of how accurate that was. And also how much you learnt out of that process. So it won't surprise you to know that there is some evidence that backs this idea up as well. And again, this is work that Daphne Koller mentions in her talk, dating back from 2006, but I've looked at several other papers that sort of support the general idea that peer grading and self-grading correlate extremely well to tutors marking it or a teacher marking the work. All right, same spread of marks, almost identical marks. There are some differences. There are differences in terms of, interestingly actually, in terms of the psychology of the people, because self-markers tend to mark a little bit harsher. Peer markers than the tutor. Peer markers tend to mark a little bit higher. But what this paper actually showed, because I did bother to go and read it as well, was that when you self-marked, then there was an improvement in your understanding of the concept. When you peer-marked, you didn't get necessarily that benefit. And certainly that was my experience, that I learnt quite a lot from the process of actually doing that assessment. Yeah, so look, there is one, in terms of the massive participation, one of the major criticisms of online courses has been this idea that there's a huge attrition rate. There's a verb, to attrit. I didn't know that you could use that. Jane Den Hollander asked the audience how many people had attrited from a MOOC. And the thing is, it takes 5 seconds to actually register for one of these courses. It takes 5 seconds to actually unregister yourself. And so if you start off with 60,000 people and only 10,000 people finish the course, then people consider that a problem, because they consider the fact that, it's a bit like the US policy of no child left behind. The idea that we're going to go and hunt down every student that doesn't attend a lecture and ask them why, sit them down with a cup of tea and say, tell us your problems. It doesn't happen. It doesn't happen here on campus. It doesn't happen in this case. The thing is, people are doing this at the moment for a whole range of reasons. And again, what's interesting is that, and I saw this in the social network analysis course, was that the course was being adapted to the different modes of interaction. There are people who are browsing, who are just going in there just to have a look. There are people who are actually doing the video, doing the assessments, doing the whole thing. And there are people who thought they were actually signing up for a shopping voucher and just stumbled on the thing. So, but one of the amazing things about when you have so many people, and this seems a little bit callous, is that you can afford wastage. So it doesn't really matter whether 150,000 people don't finish, 10,000 people did. And that's still a lot more than we would teach in any conventional way. The data collection part of it is enormous. And this is one of the things that will drive these open online courses and allow them to adapt. And will also, I think, result in a huge spurt in terms of research in educational methods. Now, again, because we can go in and we can test things as people are actually learning. And we've got massive numbers of data points. We've seen the same sort of thing in health with sites like Patients Like Me, where they can run a trial looking at how 10,000 people taking a particular drug on a particular condition and see how they come out, where clinical trials are based around of sizes of 30 people participating in a trial. So this is going to provide an enormous amount of data, both for research and also in terms of the refinement of how we teach in these environments. And you'll see the progress in terms of what they're doing will be actually quite dramatic. And I've mentioned the issue about misconceptions before. So in terms of forum and peer engagement, again, one of the things about this is that there is a forum. There are people that are discussing issues all the time, and their peers become important. There is an idea about, people have made a distinction between two different types of open online courses. One is sort of called a connectivist type course, and these were the original courses that were set up in 2008. And the idea was that they were project-based and that students could actually bring content in, in as much, on the same level as the teachers. So you were getting content provided to you by the course, but you were also getting content that teachers that students who were participating could actually contribute as well. The courses that are on Coursera or edX are slightly different. Okay, examples. So I've mentioned these sites before, but just do a little bit of stats around it. Coursera currently has 198 courses being contributed by 33 universities. They've had 1.1 million students from 196 countries enrolled in at least one course. So that's in the space of less than a year that they've done this. edX, which started just recently, but was built on initiatives from Harvard and Berkeley, has just the 4 universities involved in it, and they've got about 3 or 4 courses. and Udacity has 18 courses with about 113,000 people. ClasstoGo is a new platform. This is the one that we're interested in at UWA because we've entered a collaboration with Stanford in development of this platform. What's revolutionary about this is that Stanford decided they're involved in Coursera, but they wanted to build their own platform that they could use internally and also to host public courses that were separate from Coursera. And so they built this platform, but they open sourced it, which meant that they gave the software to anybody who wants to actually take it and run their own course. Why this is revolutionary, it means that anybody can actually do this. And so you'll get universities like UWA being able to host their own courses using a platform, or any University of Uzbekistan or the Chinese or whatever, and they will be able to provide courses in their own languages. Coursera is starting to branch out into multilingual courses, and there are students who are being crowdsourced into providing translations now of text. So if you want to do French studies as well as learn how to program, Bill, on Coursera from the Polytechnic at Lausanne, you can do that. So you can study elementary programming in French. So ClasstoGo launched very recently. It's got 2 Publix courses, 6 internal, and this is the platform that we will be using. Just to give you a flavor, I just got a short video just to show you. This is Coursera. There isn't a soundtrack. So you've got all the courses that you're enrolled in. This is mine. And so I've just finished the one from the University of Pennsylvania. Along the side here, you've got quizzes, videos, discussion forums. The videos are set out, and it gives you a record of which ones you've watched. And then there's any reading material that you happen to want to look at. Also, you can download the movie for offline viewing, and you can download transcripts. So if you're hard of hearing, you can actually get the transcript as well. Quizzes, so it shows you information about whether you've done them or not. And if you attempt them, these are just multiple choice, and then it will score you immediately, and you get feedback as to what you've done wrong, and you can try these any number of times. I think in this particular course, you got credit if you did 2 or 3 of them, so the bar wasn't set particularly very high about this. And then you've got the forums. And the interesting thing about this is that, for example, the one, Where Are You From? It's 2,500 people have viewed that, 200 posts. Sorry, very quickly. This is edX. This is the artificial intelligence course from Berkeley. Again, similar sort of setup. The only thing that's different in this one is that in the videos that they have done a slightly different approach to the videos where they step you through very short segments, and they have the quizzes there, and they also have a nice little feature which shows the transcript as they're talking, and it scrolls in real time. Again, multiple choice questions, other quizzes. There you can do some programming as well. And this is the ClasstoGo platform that we're using. Similar sort of thing. They've taken an even different approach, which is that they've split the slides up so that you can scroll to particular areas. This is a Berkeley professor who's teaching computer networks. Okay, so I just wanted to come to disruption and the idea about what this means for universities and students and people generally in the world. So I mentioned right at the beginning about the idea that we're in a similar sort of stage that the newspaper industry was when new media came along, where the music industry was when music came along. And I had exactly this conversation with an executive from EMI back in London back in the 90s, where I said, "What are you doing about the internet?" He scoffed, laughed, and we went back to our pint. And so the rest is history, as they say. Again, Newsweek last week put up their shutters, no longer going to be in print. The Guardian newspaper now contemplating no longer being available in print. Newspapers, magazines struggling to make money. We've heard some university vice chancellors mention the fact that we won't make the same mistake again, in particular I think it was somebody will correct me, along the University of, the ANU, who said, we're not going to do this because otherwise we'll end up like the newspaper industry and we'll be self-sabotaging our own courses. Well, it wasn't the fact that the Times put their own articles up there that disrupted the Times. It was the fact that the Guardian did it and the Telegraph and everybody else. So it's not something that we can actually afford to ignore, especially those universities that don't do research and rely solely on teaching. These courses are extremely high quality. Yes, there are some dodgy ones, and it's really down to academics and the quality ones will survive. The ones that aren't particularly good won't. The aspect of free is something that we won't be able to ignore. They're flexible. And I suppose the critical thing, again, is the fact that they are innovating around the way they deliver education in a way that universities can't do. If we have provenance, we have committees to go through to approve a course. If they want to put a course up, they can do it in a week. There's nobody going to say, no, you can't. Well, in fact, there is. The Minnesota state government this last week banned Coursera from their state because they hadn't applied for a license to educate their citizens. So Coursera now has a sign up saying, if you're from Minnesota, please don't take any of these courses. So, yeah, you've got to love it, don't you? And I think that's the key thing is that we can actually learn from this in terms of the way we actually teach, the way we provide content. But these guys are going to do it in an accelerating and incredibly rapid way. Now, yes, they haven't started offering degrees yet. I will talk about the accreditation issue on these courses. Accreditation, you can accredit, you can get proctored exams, not only by companies like Pearson's who are offering this now, but certainly more and more universities are actually saying, yes, we will offer you, our students, credit if you do one of these courses. And that's, again, when it becomes more of a game changer. So the regulations sort of in Australia, which sort of we have to go through in terms of before we get to that point. But we already offer students, for example, credit if they go and do an adventure in Guatemala. So, offered through a different university. And so that's really not that different to doing a course from Harvard. Well, it is, but life experience, Harvard, same sort of thing. So we will see, I think, and this is my own personal opinion, participation in universities in hosting these. So we are seeing in the States a rush to get onto Coursera, onto the platforms that are there. The thing is that these are a commercial organization, so that's coming at a price. And the price is actually quite high at the moment. It's several $1 million per institution. So people are paying that level. I don't know what University of Melbourne paid to get their 6 courses online, but they paid. It's a business. They have to be able to pay for staff to run the service. We will see open courses becoming part of the curriculum. It already is in certain situations, but I think there will be a lot of different pressures on universities in terms of actually getting that. And the accreditation options will increase. There's really no reason why we couldn't credit these courses. The other thing is that there's all sorts of other reasons why we may want to use this. In particular with our higher degree by research students, somebody who's coming in to do a PhD who doesn't have necessarily any experience. So if I wanted to do a PhD in education, for example, I might take a couple of courses on Coursera to give me that prerequisite type of understanding before I went on and did my PhD. We already do that, but it's slightly harder because you've got timing, you've got all these other issues, and it's a little bit more difficult if the lecture theatre is already full with people who are attending. Also, we as a university are going through the same sort of pressures that other universities are with bigger class sizes when we move to the new course structures. The foundation courses, for example, suddenly got to the point where we had too many students to fit in one lecture theatre. We're already splitting students over a lecture theatre where there is a projected version of the lecture going on in one theatre and the live performance going on in another. So if the students are already sitting watching a screen, they can do that more effectively through this type of format. And yes, teaching universities will struggle. Absolutely. I think that is absolutely a given. So I just wanted to finish, because now almost out of time, just about UWA's current project. We're embarked in a small project around a collaboration with Stanford. As I said, they have open sourced their software. My center offered to basically create the mobile version, so an iPhone and Android smartphone applications that would allow people to access the ClasstoGo platform from your phone. I really like the concept of doing an entire degree on an iPhone. I think there should be an award for the first student who successfully accomplishes that. And doing it used via the web browser, it doesn't really work very well. We're actually, I think, quite clever at doing this sort of software, so I'm going over next week to show them what we've done so far. Also, we are going to be developing several courses, and this is mainly to look at how we can use it internally. So we have a couple of people in the room who are sort of working on that. So one in sociology, hopefully one in, or two in sociology, in arts, in the area of sociology, and one in engineering, and hopefully one in science initially. But if there are any academics in the room who are really motivated to doing this, I would certainly be willing to talk about actually putting them online. The idea here is to use them internally for our students in the flipped classroom mode, and that idea is that we stop giving them lectures, we give them the videos, and then we concentrate on interactive problem solving, tutorials, etc. So I've gone over time, actually, because I was looking at the wrong clock. So I think I'll stop there. Thank you very much.